Battle of Talas, 751. In the mid-8th century, the eastward expansion of the Arab Abbasid Caliphate collided with the westward expansion of China's Tang dynasty in the Talas River Valley, located in modern-day Kyrgyzstan. The Tang army, commanded by Gao Xianji, initially held the line against the Arab and Tibetan forces. The engagement was decided on the fifth day, when Karluk mercenaries, who made up two-thirds of the Tang army, they defected to the Abbasid side and attacked the Chinese forces from the rear. The resulting rout forced the Tang dynasty to retreat from Central Asia. This battle established the border between Buddhist/Confucian civilization and the Islamic world, leading to the gradual Islamization of the Turkic peoples. Crucially, Chinese prisoners of war captured at Talas introduced the technology of papermaking to the Middle East, which soon spread to Europe. Battle of Manzikert, 1071. The Byzantine Empire sought to secure its eastern borders against the encroaching Seljuk Turks. Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes led an army into eastern Anatolia to confront the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan. Alp Arslan employed traditional nomadic horse archer tactics, forming his army into a crescent shape that slowly yielded ground while showering the heavily armored Byzantine infantry with arrows. When Romanos ordered a withdrawal at dusk, and confusion and betrayal within the Byzantine ranks caused the retreat to collapse into a panicked rout. Romanos IV was captured. The defeat crippled the Byzantine military and permanently broke their hold over Anatolia, the empire's primary source of grain and manpower. The influx of Turkic tribes into the region established the foundation for the future Ottoman Empire and directly prompted the First Crusade. Battle of Tenochtitlan, 1521. Hernan Cortes arrived in Mexico and set his sights on Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, built on an island in Lake Texcoco. After being expelled from the city during the Noche Triste, Cortes rebuilt his forces and formed a massive alliance with indigenous groups, primarily the Tlaxcalans, who were eager to overthrow Aztec rule. The Cortes constructed a fleet of shallow draft brigantines to control the lake and blockaded the causeways leading into the city, cutting off the Aztecs' food and water supply. The siege lasted 93 days. The defenders, weakened by starvation and an outbreak of smallpox introduced by the Europeans, were systematically overwhelmed in brutal urban combat. The fall of Tenochtitlan destroyed the Aztec Empire, secured vast quantities of gold and silver for Spain, and initiated 3 centuries of European colonialism in the Americas. Battle of Sekigahara, 1600. Following the death of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Japan split into 2 massive factions: the Eastern Army led by Tokugawa Ieyasu and the Western Army led by Ishida Mitsunari. The two forces, totaling approximately 160,000 samurai, clashed in the narrow Sekigahara Valley. The Western Army initially held the tactical advantage on the high ground. The battle turned on a prearranged defection. Kobayakawa Hideaki, a commander in the Western Army positioned on Mount Matsuo, had secretly struck a deal with Ieyasu. When pressured by warning shots from Tokugawa's arquebusiers, Kobayakawa charged down the mountain and smashed into the flank of his own allies. The Western Army disintegrated. Ieyasu's victory eliminated his remaining rivals, allowing him to establish the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled a unified, strictly isolated Japan for the next 268 years. It was Battle of Vienna, 1683. The Ottoman Empire, under Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, launched a massive invasion into Central Europe and besieged Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. For 2 months, Ottoman engineers dug trenches and detonated subterranean mines beneath the city walls, bringing Vienna to the brink of collapse. On September 12th, a relief coalition of Holy Roman and Polish-Lithuanian forces arrived on the Kahlenberg Heights, overlooking the city. The King Jan III, Sobieski of Poland, commanded the combined army. In the late afternoon, following hours of infantry combat, Sobieski led an estimated 18,000 cavalrymen, spearheaded by 3,000 heavily armored Polish winged hussars, in the largest cavalry charge in recorded history. The massive wedge shattered the Ottoman lines and broke the siege. This defeat marked the permanent end of Ottoman territorial expansion into Europe. Battle of Blenheim, 1704. During the War of the Spanish Succession, King Louis XIV of France sought to capture Vienna and knock the Holy Roman Empire out of the war, cementing French dominance over Europe. To prevent this, the Duke of Marlborough marched an Anglo-Dutch army 250 miles from the Low Countries to Bavaria, joining forces with Prince Eugene of Savoy. They engaged the Franco-Bavarian army near the village of Blenheim. Marlborough launched a concentrated assault against the French center, exploiting a gap between their primary formations. He committed his cavalry reserves to completely shatter the French line, capturing their commander, Marshal Tallard, and driving thousands of French troops into the Danube River. The victory destroyed the myth of French military invincibility, saved Vienna, and ensured that Europe would not fall under absolute Bourbon hegemony. Battle of Plassey, 1757. The British East India Company, acting as a sovereign power, sought to remove the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, who had recently captured the British stronghold of Calcutta. Colonel Robert Clive led a small force of 3,000 company troops to confront the Nawab's army of 50,000 men. Clive relied entirely on political subversion rather than military tactics. He had secretly negotiated a deal with Mir Jafar, the commander of the Nawab's army. When the battle commenced, the vast majority of the Bengali forces under Mir Jafar refused to engage and stood completely still. A brief artillery exchange and a localized skirmish resulted in the Nawab fleeing the field. The British installed Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler, granting the East India Company direct control over the immense wealth of Bengal, which funded the subsequent British conquest of the entire Indian subcontinent. Battle of Saratoga, 1777. British General John Burgoyne executed a campaign to march south from Canada, aiming to capture the Hudson River Valley and physically sever New England from the rest of the rebellious American colonies. His army was hindered by difficult terrain and logistical failures. American forces, commanded by Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold, entrenched themselves at Bemis Heights in New York. The British launched two major assaults, the Battle of Freeman's Farm and the Battle of Bemis Heights. American sharpshooters systematically targeted British officers and artillery crews. Surrounded, outnumbered, and out of supplies, Burgoyne surrendered his entire army of 6,000 men on October 17th. This decisive American victory proved to the courts of Europe that the Continental Army could fight a conventional war, convincing France to officially ally with the United States and provide vital military and naval support. Battle of Yorktown, 1781. Following years of campaigning in the American South, British General Lord Cornwallis moved his army to the coastal port of Yorktown, Virginia, expecting resupply and evacuation by the Royal Navy. However, a French fleet under Admiral de Grasse intercepted and defeated the British fleet at the Battle of the Chesapeake, completely cutting off Cornwallis's sea escape. On land, a combined American and French army, commanded by George Washington and the Comte de Rochambeau, marched south and laid siege to the town. The Allied forces dug parallel trenches closer and closer to the British lines, subjecting them to continuous, devastating artillery bombardment. After American and French infantry seized redoubts 9 and 10 in a nighttime bayonet assault, Cornwallis surrendered his command of 8,000 men. This effectively ended major military operations in North America and guaranteed American independence. And Battle of Trafalgar, 1805. Napoleon Bonaparte assembled a combined French and Spanish fleet to seize control of the English Channel and clear the way for an invasion of Britain. The British Royal Navy, under Admiral Horatio Nelson, intercepted the Franco-Spanish fleet off the coast of Spain near Cape Trafalgar. Ignoring the orthodox tactic of fighting in parallel lines, Nelson divided his 27 ships into two columns and sailed directly perpendicular into the enemy line. Crossing the T, this broke the Franco-Spanish formation into isolated groups, forcing them into chaotic ship-to-ship combat, where superior British gunnery and training prevailed. The British captured or destroyed 22 enemy vessels without losing a single ship, though Nelson was killed by a sniper. Trafalgar permanently eliminated the threat of a French invasion and established unquestioned British naval supremacy for the next 100 years. The Battle of Sedan, 1870. Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck provoked the Franco-Prussian War to unify the independent German states into a single empire. The French army of Chalons, commanded by Emperor Napoleon III, and Marshal MacMahon, attempted to relieve the besieged city of Metz. The highly efficient Prussian military, utilizing railways for rapid deployment and Krupp breech-loading artillery, outmaneuvered the French and pinned them against the Belgian border at the town of Sedan. The Prussian forces completely encircled the French. The French launched desperate cavalry charges to break the ring, but they were annihilated by concentrated artillery and rifle fire. On September 2nd, Napoleon III formally surrendered himself and his remaining army of 104,000 men. The French Second Empire collapsed immediately, and the victory culminated in the creation of the German Empire in 1871, fundamentally shifting the balance of power in Europe. A Battle of Verdun, 1916. The Battle of Verdun was the longest and one of the most brutal engagements of World War I. German Chief of General Staff Erich von Falkenhayn designed the offensive not to capture territory, but to draw the French army into a meat grinder, aiming to bleed France white. The Germans launched a massive artillery bombardment against the historic fortress city of Verdun. General Philippe Pétain took command of the French defense, reorganizing logistics via a single road known as the Voie Sacrée, and rotating divisions rapidly to sustain the line. The battle raged for 302 days in an area of just a few square kilometers, which was completely pulverized by an estimated 40 million artillery shells. The French held the line. Combined casualties exceeded 700,000. Verdun broke the offensive capacity of both armies and became the ultimate symbol of the industrial slaughter of modern warfare. The Battle of Moscow, 1941. Adolf Hitler's Operation Barbarossa aimed to annihilate the Soviet Union before the onset of winter. By October 1941, German panzer divisions were within 20 miles of Moscow, launching Operation Typhoon to capture the capital. The German advance stalled due to the Rasputitsa, heavy autumn rains that turned the unpaved Russian roads into impassable mud, and heavily extended supply lines. When the freezing winter arrived, German troops lacked winter clothing and their equipment froze. Soviet General Georgy Zhukov reorganized the defense. Crucially, Soviet intelligence confirmed Japan would not attack the USSR in the east, allowing Zhukov to transfer hundreds of thousands of fresh, winter-equipped Siberian troops to the Moscow front. On December 5th, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive, driving the exhausted German forces back. This marked the first strategic defeat of the Wehrmacht and condemned Germany to a protracted, unwinnable two-front war. Battle of Kursk, 1943. In a final attempt to regain the initiative on the Eastern Front, following the disaster at Stalingrad, the German military launched Operation Citadel to pinch off a massive Soviet salient around the city of Kursk. The Soviets, forewarned by British intelligence and their own spy networks, constructed the most extensive defensive works in military history, consisting of thousands of miles of trenches, minefields, and anti-tank ditches arranged in deep echelons. When the Germans attacked, their armored spearheads ground down through the defensive belts. The battle culminated at Prokhorovka, the largest tank engagement in history, where hundreds of Soviet T-34s clashed at close range with German Tiger and Panther tanks. The German offensive was halted, and they lacked the reserves to replace their losses. Kursk permanently transferred the strategic initiative to the Red Army, which began a continuous offensive all the way to Berlin. Yom Kippur War, 1973. On October 6, 1973, during the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria launched a surprise joint attack against Israel to reclaim territories lost in the 1967 Six-Day War. Egyptian forces crossed the Suez Canal using high-pressure water cannons to blast through the massive sand walls of the Israeli Bar-Lev line. Simultaneously, Syrian armored columns assaulted the Golan Heights. Israel suffered heavy initial casualties, but mobilized its reserves and launched counteroffensives, eventually crossing the Suez Canal into Egypt and pushing within artillery range of Damascus. The United States and the Soviet Union engaged in massive resupply efforts to their respective allies. In response to U.S. support for Israel, OAPEC initiated an oil embargo, triggering a severe global economic crisis. The war directly laid the groundwork for the 1978 Camp David Accords, fundamentally reorganizing Middle Eastern diplomacy.